Today, we're going to talk about 1. Itemization changes, 2. The new Pit of the Artificer endgame content, 3. The updates to Helltides, and then 4. The new crafting systems. Let's get right to it. The old convoluted system of having to sit around after a dungeon and spend cumulatively hours worth of game time to figure out what's an upgrade and what's trash are gone. The new system, items are much simpler on their initial drop, and the complexity comes when you get to crafting them. Here are the core changes. 1, items have significantly less affixes on them. That's right, on rare items that drop, you'll have 2 maximum affixes, and for legendaries, you get 3, but you can update ancestral legendaries to have 5 with the new temporary mechanic that we'll talk about over in the crafting section of this video. Next, the affixes themselves are 1, much simpler, so you can understand what they're saying, and 2, much more impactful in my opinion. So gone are very conditional affixes like damage to distant enemies while they're poisoned or things of that sort. Instead, you're going to see things like plus maximum life, flat plus attack speed, flat plus damage, percentage to attack speed, percentage to damage, resource or life on kill. Now, one big pet peeve that exists in live is managing your aspects. So if a legendary drops, you'll look at it, look for an aspect that you want, and then you'll drop that in your inventory in case you're iterating on future gear and you may need that. So in my experience, my stash was always cluttered with duplicate aspects just in case I wanted to imprint them later on, and a lot of them could not be found in the Codex of Power, or Codex of Power only imprinted the lowest possible roll of that aspect. So let's jump into the next really cool section, which is the Codex of Power. Now, playing around with the PTR, you can see that the Codex of Power houses all of the aspects, not just the ones found in dungeons. So anyone that you drop will now update the Codex of Power upon salvaging it. There's now visual indicators on items, both when you scroll over them and straight up in the inventory, that lets you know upon salvaging this item, it'll either unlock a higher rank of an aspect in the Codex of Power. So if you get a higher range of, say, like the accelerating aspect that increases your attack speed, if you get a higher value of that, and then you salvage that legendary that dropped with that higher value, you now permanently have that highest value in your Codex of Power that you can use as many times as you want on any new item. I love that. Huge quality of life change. And frankly, a huge fix to hoarding in your stash. Now, the last piece I want to cover too that I experienced is that Raider affixes do have a chance to drop for ancestral legendaries. And what Greater affixes do is they increase by 50% 1 to 2 random affixes on that item. And I did get lucky enough to have one to drop in a Helltide. Speaking of Helltides, let's talk about the complete revamp of our favorite overworld mechanic. Upon entering a Helltide, you will now see 2 brand new UI elements that you'll want to pay attention to. First, you'll see a pentagram icon with a little meter to the right of it. This meter has 3 different indents. Each indent represents your threat level. That's right, guys. Wanted stars are back, and they're in Diablo 4. The way this works is each time you do activities in the Helltide, you kill monsters, you disrupt rituals, you do events, you open chests, your threat is going to rise. Upon hitting a new increment, you'll receive a message and a little sound that notifies you that the forces of hell have become aware of your presence. And you'll start getting swarmed by a higher density of demons that become more difficult over time. And then when your meter is maxed, it summons a player character-like elite mob called a Hellborn. These are extremely difficult. I fought a few of them. One of them caused me multiple deaths beware of the sorcerer hellborns, but it was a very fun challenge. I wasn't just face rolling Helltides anymore. It was a really fun fight, and that's how I got my first greater affix. I also noticed while I was killing random monsters within the Helltide that I was getting a lot of these Forgotten Souls to drop, which is really cool. In addition to these UI elements, there are now more events and whispers built into each Helltide. So if you look onto the map, you'll see an icon, a typical whisper icon, on the map where the Helltide is, with a flame at the bottom right, indicating that that whisper is tied to events within that Helltide. Now, upon accomplishing a lot of these activities, you will get hearts to drop, and these hearts will be used to summon a new boss in the Helltide called the Blood Maiden. I personally have yet to experience that in the PTR, but hey, stay tuned. Now also, I almost forgot, Helltides are now available in both World Tiers 1 and World Tier 2. So you can experience these while leveling up post-campaign when you start a new season. Now let's segue into one of my favorite new activities I experienced in the PTR, and that is the Pit of the Artificer. The way you access the Pit of the Artificer is once you reach World Tier 4, you'll get a quest that takes you to Sergar. Here, you'll interact with a stone that looks exactly like a rift stone from Diablo 3. It's clear they did not shy away from expressing where they pulled this idea from. Upon interacting with the stone, you could choose a tier of the pit to access and begin running through. The Pit of the Artificer stone will explode into a portal just like Greater Rifts and allow you access to this new endgame activity. So the way the pit works is each tier has a certain monster level. It starts out at monster level 100 for tier 1, and you have 10 minutes to kill as many monsters as possible. They don't drop any loot. There are shrines thrown about the place to help you clear. Once you've cleared enough and you beat the timer, a portal will open, taking you to the Pit Guardian, Rift Guardian, who's housed in his own arena. And upon defeating the Rift Guardian, you get showered with loot. You get a chest with resources that you will use for one of the crafting mechanisms we'll talk about called Masterworking. And depending on the speed that you clear the pit, you'll unlock additional tiers of difficulty so you can keep jumping in. As of this video, there hasn't been any ladder announced for it, but I really hope they do that because I feel like that's something I would love to participate in addition to the gauntlet added in Season 3. Let's jump right into the completely revamped crafting system. So tempering is a brand new crafting system available now in the PTR. The way you access tempering is you go to the blacksmith and there's a new window specifically for this mechanic. And what tempering does is it allows you to add additional brand new affixes to your existing items. I mentioned earlier that legendaries when they drop have 3 affixes. With ancestral legendaries, each one you could add an additional 2 on top of the 3 for a total of 5. And here's how it works. So depending on the type of item you insert, you have 1 out of 6 options you could choose, affix categories that you can choose to temper your item with. You choose one of these categories, it will give you a list of tempering recipes. Each of these recipes have a list of specific affixes that it has a chance to roll into. And you can find these recipes as drops in any activity in the game. You just need to right-click these in town and it'll update in the tempering UI and allow you to add those recipes. Some cool ones that I saw were increasing the size of your actual projectiles and skills, and I love this. Now, say that you chose a recipe and it gave you one of the affixes that you're not too crazy about. For example, as a necromancer, there's a recipe called Necromancer Motion. Let's say that I ended up rolling movement speed during Blood Mist, but I don't use Blood Mist and I don't want to use Blood Mist. I would rather just have the flat movement speed affix from that recipe. Now, each item has a number of tempers attached to it. So what that means is if there is a temper that you didn't like, you have the ability to overwrite it by re-rolling. Now, you could have really bad luck and roll, say, 5 times on these boots, which I believe will end up bricking the item in terms of tempering, but you do have those chances. But we'll see how that ends up playing out in live. Masterworking is considered the endgame crafting system, and this is the system that you're going to want to use to min-max your best item. Now, the way it works is you go to the blacksmith, and there is a new 4th option called Masterworking. Now, I believe that Masterworking will not unlock until World Tier 4, as it goes hand in hand with the Pit of the Artificer content. Now, Masterworking replaces the old item upgrade feature, allowing you to upgrade an Ancestral Legendary up to 12 different times. Now, these 12 upgrades are also tiered. So every 4 levels requires a different type of material that you can only currently secure from the Pit of the Artificer endgame content. Dependent on the difficulty tier that you're accomplishing in the Pit of the Artificer, you'll be proportionally rewarded with one of these mats for the tier. So the first tier of item upgrades up to level 4, you'll need materials called Obdicite, and it allows you to upgrade your item 4 different times, in which all of your affixes will be updated by a certain percent. Now, also on the 4th upgrade, a random affix of yours will get a boosted upgrade. Now, this is totally random, so if you fully upgrade an item and you wish a different affix got upgraded instead, you can reset that upgrade back to 0 without bricking the item and go through that process again until you get the affix that you do want. From 0 to 4, you need a material called Obdicite, which is obtained in the beginning levels of the Pit of the Artificer. The next is Neath Iron. And then the third, honestly, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I don't think anyone will be able to access that for a bit of time. Let's break down my thoughts here. Overall, I love the new additions. They're adding so much more depth and just frankly things to do in Diablo 4. Many more builds were enabled, like Frozen Orb Sorceresses are back, Necromancer Minion builds are back, and Barbarian Dust Devils seem to be causing one heck of a storm. So overall, not only is there going to be a lot of new content for you guys to come back to, but many builds that were underwhelming before are now going to be a lot of fun to play around with. The only reservation I have is regarding the itemization. I feel like with rares only have 2 affixes, and by the way, I did test to see if imprinting a rare with an aspect and promoting it to legendary that way will give it a 3rd affix. It did not. It still only had 2. So as of the time of this video, rares are complete vendor trash and are only good for salvaging. But besides that, overall, I feel very positive. This definitely reignited my passion for the game, and I could see myself putting a lot of hours. Now, as of last video, I did mention that my first 50 followers, not subscribers, no money needing to be paid here, will be shouted out on each of my videos. That being said, thank you Irish Guy, and thank you Madeline for following me on my Twitch chat. If you guys want a shout out of your own, be sure to follow my Twitch. I do stream 5 times a week currently. Hope to chat with you there.